In this video, we're going to look at how we can work with our rows and columns. This includes selecting, adding and deleting, moving, resizing, and sorting. Let's go to Pages. So we have our table here that we're working on. Let's go and look at how we can select our rows and columns. To select a column, all we need to do is just click anywhere in the table, and up at the top, you're going to see a row of letters. These are our columns. So if I wanted to select column D, I click on D, and now I've just selected that column. I want to go and select a row. The rows are labeled with numbers. So I want to go and select row 3. I click on 3, and now I've selected that row. Now when we select a row or column, you're going to see that we have these dots. This allows me to increase my selection. Take the dot up, and now I have 2 rows selected. Same thing with columns. Let's go with C. We have our dot. Drag it to the right, and I've selected 2 columns. Now I can also select columns that are not next to each other. To do that, we use the Command key, which is next to the space bar. So let's go and select B, and now I want to select D. I'm going to hold down the Command key, and you can see I have both of those columns selected. We can do the same thing with rows. So that's how we can select non-consecutive rows and columns. Now let's look at how we can add rows and columns. I'm going to click outside to deselect. To add a row or column, we have a few different ways to do this. First thing is I have to click on the table. It doesn't matter where I click on it, so let's go ahead and click on the cell here. And let's go and talk about adding columns first. One way of adding columns is going to the right, and we have these 2 vertical lines. And when I click on it, I can go and add more columns. You can see I'm adding columns. Click on the down arrow, and it deletes them. We can do the same thing with rows. In the lower left-hand corner, we have these 2 horizontal lines. Looks like an equal sign. I click on it, and I can go and add rows and delete rows. Another way of adding rows and columns is going up to the menu bar. If we go up to the menu bar and we go to Format, you're going to see Table. And from here I can go and add a row above or add a row below, as well as add a column before and add a column after. What does this mean, before and after? Well, if we look, we have a cell selected. So let's say I wanted to add a column before this cell. Then what I would do is I would go and add a column before. If I wanted to add a row above it, add row above. And now I've just added a row above that. And then the third way to add rows and columns, if we go to the top of the column where we go and select the column, we have a drop-down arrow on the right side. And when I click on this, I can go and add a column before as well as after. It's also where I can go and delete a column. And if we go to our rows, we have the same option. We've got a drop-down arrow there. And when I select it, I can go and add a row above, below, and I can also go and delete it. So that's how we add and delete rows and columns. Now let's look at moving rows and columns. Let's say I wanted column C here to be before column B. How do I move this? Well, the first thing we have to do is we have to go and select the column. So I'm going to click on it. We have our column selected. Now what I do is I drag it. I click and drag to where I want it. So I'm going to click and drag, and you can see I'm moving it. We can do the same thing with rows. I click the row that I want to move. It is now selected. And now I click and drag, and I can go and move it. How do we resize our rows and columns? Let's look at columns first. If I wanted to make column B wider, what I do is I move my cursor to the edge of column B, and you're going to see that it changes. And now all I have to do is just drag this to the left or right, and I can resize it. If I wanted to make column C wider, I drag it to the right edge of column C, the cursor changes, and now I just drag. We have the same option with rows. I want to make row 4 taller. Move my cursor at the bottom of the row, cursor changes, and I can go and make it taller. So this is how I made, let's go back over to page 2. This is how I made this column wider. Went to column A here, move over to the right, you can see the cursor changes, and now I can go and make it wider. Now if we select multiple rows or columns, we can adjust the size of those all together. I'm going to select B here, and I'm going to go and drag to select all of our columns. Now if I go and move my cursor up to the top here, you can see that it changes, being that all of those columns are selected. When I resize this, it's going to affect all of the columns. So let's go and resize this, and you can see all of them are getting smaller. We have the same option with rows. And then finally, if I want to sort my rows, we can't sort our columns, but we can sort our rows. Let's say I wanted to sort my event names here. I go up to A, and I got the drop-down arrow, and now I can sort ascending and descending. So let's go ahead and sort it, and now they're sorted. So those are the different ways we can work with our rows and columns, including selecting, adding and deleting, moving, resizing, and sorting in Pages.